You guys, Erin here, back with another moon update for you. I'm going to be talking about the full super moon we've got coming up here on Wednesday, August 30th. It peaks at 6:35 p.m. Pacific time, and this full moon is in the sign of Pisces, 7 degrees Pisces. Now, as with any full moon, this is the peak of a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago when we had a new moon in the sign of Pisces. Over these 6 months, we've all been experiencing an opportunity for growth that is related to this sign of Pisces. Now, this full moon is a time to honor that growth. Also, as soon as this moon begins to wane, and what I mean by that is if it peaks at 6:35 p.m. Pacific time, by 6:36, the moon is starting to wane. That's time to let go of any of this Piscean energy that you may have picked up on that is not serving you. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to break down this sign of Pisces so you know what you're working with here. I'm also going to be I'm going to pull up the chart and show you some other very wild, prominent astrological forces we're receiving at the time of this full super moon. A lot of retrogrades going on. I'm also going to be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Pisces, because these parts of our body become more sensitive when the moon transits through the sign of Pisces, but especially a full moon in the sign of Pisces. And so I will also be talking about some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body. And of course, I will also bring up some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Pisces, but also just some gemstones that kind of help support us through this lunar transit. Now, I do have a couple announcements to make before I really get rolling with this. First of all, I wanted to say that I pulled out my journal the other day to look back how long I've been doing this for. Every single new moon, every single full moon, so every 2 weeks, I've been pulling out my journal. When it's a new moon, I write down the growth that I want to experience that's related to the sign the moon is waning or waxing through, getting bigger through. When it's a new moon, of course, that's the time we manifest new beginnings. And when it's a full moon, I pull out my journal and I write down the growth that I'm grateful for and what I want to let go of that's related to the sign the moon is transiting through. Since 2015, I believe it was June of 2015 was my first entry. And I would not be continuing to do this if I didn't see such incredible results from this. Okay. And as some of you know, I take my gemstones that resonate well with that Zodiac sign. I put them on top of my journal. Well, something happened. I'm going to be teaching a series of 6 classes for the Academy for Astrological Medicine, which is an academy that I've attended for years and absolutely love. Okay, this series of classes is very specifically for those of you who are trying to learn how to read a natal chart, okay? Especially for those of you who want to move on to learn medical astrology. This is a great introduction for that, but it does not have to be for medical astrology. This is more than anything to teach you guys how to read a natal chart. So when I pulled out my journal the other day, I found a few entries where I literally wrote down, I am manifesting teaching for the Academy for Astrological Medicine. And I can't believe it's actually happening. I'm really, really excited about it. Now, this is a great set of classes. I wish that if I could rewind time, man, I wish that this was available to me when I was first learning astrology. For those of you who are curious, I started learning astrology through the American Federation School of Astrologers, which is an excellent school, but very, very technical and very difficult. We had to learn how to hand calculate a natal chart. Very, very intense work. I'm glad I did it, of course, but it was very, very tough. But this is for those of you who, you want to know the root of the basics of Western astrology. Perfect set of classes for that. Not only that, but they're very, very affordable. And if you can't afford the full payment at once, I believe there's even you can get on a payment program. Okay, so if you go to academyforastrologicalmedicine.com, or you can just go to judithhillastrology.com, you will see, you'll see the access to the classes and that sort of thing. The classes will begin on September 18th at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Basically, that's a Monday. Every Monday for 6 weeks after September 18th, we will meet at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time for 1 hour, and everything is recorded. So if you can't make the live class, you will receive, even if you do attend the live class, you still have access to the recordings, lifetime access to the recordings. Okay, now, what I like to do, what I've been doing for years, is I like to attend the live classes and participate in the live chat. I like to pay attention as best as I can. And then I go back to those recordings, and that's when I take the notes. Of course, everybody learns differently, but that's all up to you. But this is, thought that some of you out there might be very curious and might be very interested in joining these classes. It's going to be really fun. Okay, so there's that. Let's see. The other announcement I wanted to make is I apologize for getting this recording out so late with such late notice. And some of you who follow my recordings regularly, you might notice that sometimes I can't get my video up until like 2 days before the new moon or the full moon or that sort of thing. I just got home from a family reunion and I've really just been trying to play catch up with work. But I do not mean to sound like every other YouTuber out there, but if you hit the bell, look for the little bell icon. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look for a little bell. If you click there, YouTube will notify you right away when I put out a new video. So that way, you're not missing it. Because I realize that, if I'm putting a video out 2 days before the new moon, it might not show up in your feed until 3 days after the new moon. And if that's the case, if you're seeing this after the full moon in Pisces, that's perfectly okay. You can still work with this energy. As usual, I do recommend trying to get your journal out and write this stuff down in the hours leading up to the new moon or the full moon. But if you're, a day or two late, it's better than nothing. That's for sure. Okay, so let's get into this. This sign of Pisces, the mystic of the zodiac, okay? Pisces is what we call the mutable water sign. Now, when I say mutable, what I'm talking about is adaptability. Okay, this sign of Pisces has a very strong tendency to adapt into new situations with some grace. Okay, all the mutable signs, Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius, are very adaptable energies, which is great. These signs can hang out with like all different types of people, especially Pisces tends to be one that doesn't really pass judgment on people's styles or that sort of thing. It's like the sign of selflessness, okay? But then we bring in the fact that it is in the element of water. All the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, these are the zodiac signs that are most associated with emotions and feelings, okay? The sign of Pisces can definitely be an emotional energy. A lot of times Pisces people need to just go and hide in their room and cry for a little while and not even know why the heck they're crying. Okay, so there's that. This is also, as I mentioned, this is the mystic. Okay, this is a sign that's ruled by, in traditional ancient astrology, it's ruled by Jupiter. In modern astrology, it's ruled by Neptune. In my opinion, it's ruled by both, and I'll explain to you why. Neptune is the influencer of breaking down psychic boundaries. Okay, out of all the zodiac signs, Pisces tends to have these unintentional psychic capabilities. And that comes from Neptune being one of its rulers. Neptune rules things like mysticism and spirituality. It's a very unearthly energy. That's what makes Pisces what it is. But we can't forget about Jupiter, Jupiterian energy has a lot to do with faith. Okay. Jupiter influences faith. The motto for the sign of Pisces is I believe. Okay. This is a very faith-based energy, which again, it makes it very spiritual. It makes it very psychic. It makes it very dreamy. The sign of Pisces is very much associated with dreams. Okay. If you've got a dream journal, this would be a really good time to be pulling out your journal and write the days surrounding this, especially the night of the full moon or, the morning after this full moon. If you can remember what you dreamed about, that would be great. Okay. But certainly doesn't have to be. Everybody's unique. Everybody's their own person. Not everybody remembers their dreams. And if you don't, that's perfectly okay. Okay, so there's that. Now also, let's see, Pisces it's represented by the fish, the two fish that are tied together. Now these fish are tied together because one wants to go swim out in the spirit world and just live in dreamland. And the other fish is like, nope, you're tied to me. You are stuck to this earthly, mundane experience until you're not. Okay. But for now, while we're alive, you have to stay here in the physical. Okay. These fish, it's a very, very spiritual energy. A lot of people have their sun in Pisces or even their Mercury in Pisces or even Pisces rising can have this tendency, like, especially during, say they're going to a class or something, they just kind of go off into daydream land and all of a sudden, oh shoot, I have no idea what this person was just telling me. I will say though, sometimes Pisces is psychic enough to just flip back in, psychically tap into what the person was talking about, pretend like they were listening the whole time. So there's that. But this Piscean energy, think about this. This is a time, I know so many of you are on a very strong spiritual journey right now. Okay. And this is an excellent time to be honoring that growth. How have you grown in these ways? Maybe you've been enhancing your intuition, especially using spirituality. Okay. This is a time to honor that growth. But I want to say this as well. We're living in a time, especially with Neptune going through Pisces, a lot of people are having these beautiful spiritual awakenings. But what's happening is a lot of people are kind of getting too detached from the physical realm, from their responsibilities. Like, oh, I just didn't go to work last week because I was busy with my tarot cards or my yoga practice or whatever it is, And if that's the case, if some of you might be familiar with Rudolf Steiner's work, and his, he talks about the Lucifer and Ahriman. Okay. Lucifer is the spiritual side of things. Okay. The Ahrimanic stuff is more material. Okay. And ideally, what we want to do is find a happy medium between this Lucifer energy and this Ahrimanic energy. We want to find a happy medium, especially, while we're living this very human experience here. So with that said, if again, some people might be kind of like lost in dreamland, especially because of what's going on in the world. And also, again, Neptune going through Pisces, that's a very important thing to take seriously. Like we really are having this, we have responsibilities to take care of. Okay. That's part of the reason I'm actually really glad about Saturn going through Pisces. I feel like he's snapping some people out of it and demanding to snap out of it, if that makes sense. I'll explain to you what I mean when I pull up the chart. Okay, so let's see here. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. It is the fish. It is the sign of mysticism, mutable water. I think we covered everything there. It's a beautiful sign. Just some of you already know I am Pisces. I love being a Pisces, but I will say this. When I was younger, in my younger years, I definitely had a tendency to get lost in daydream land. Oh, another thing to mention about this sign of Pisces. It's very much associated with altered states of consciousness, okay? Especially things like opiates or anything that will take you into, other realms in essence, okay? Now, a lot of people have Pisces in their natal chart, can have this tendency to get kind of lost or swept away. I actually I've lost a couple Pisces friends to opiates and things like that. And actually one of them was on a full moon in Pisces. So this sign of Pisces, if you're somebody who, let's say you're doing an ayahuasca trip or a psilocybin trip, and don't get me wrong, I have some of you who know I have a cannabis farm and I love, experimenting with altered states of consciousness, only with the natural things, only with things like psilocybin and cannabis and that sort of thing. But, this is a time when there's a full moon in Pisces, it's easy to kind of, if you take that stuff, let's say you were to be taking 20 milligrams of psilocybin 3 days a week, and you're used to it. And then all of a sudden there's a full moon in Pisces and you take that same dose of psilocybin, all of a sudden you're tripping out way harder than you would be if the moon was in a different place, especially because this is a super moon. So keep that in mind. I feel like probably most of my audience is not out there abusing substances or anything like that. But if you are, if you're somebody who's, say you're hooked on, especially prescription opiates or something like that, be very, very careful with yourself in the days surrounding this transit, especially on the actual full moon, August 30th. Okay, so there's that. Enough rambling there. Let's pull up the chart and kind of go through some details here. So for those of you who are new to my recordings, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. Okay, now let's start here. Here's the moon. These little things right here, these are the symbols for the celestial bodies. Here's the moon, here's Saturn, up here's Pluto, over here's Mars, here's Mercury, here's the sun. Okay, so here's the moon. When we go in the wheel a little way, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that these things are all going to be beaming through at the time of this full moon. And I will say this as well. Okay, here's the moon, and you can see it's at 7 degrees. There's a little number 7 there. Pisces. There's the symbol for Pisces. For everybody on Earth using Western astrology, the moon is going to be at 7 degrees Pisces, and to be specific, 25 minutes. Now, if you take the time to pull up the chart based on your location, say you're over in New York or something, you're going to see the moon is up here, but it'll still be at 7 degrees Pisces. Or if you're over in the UK, let's see, the moon would probably be somewhere over here, but it'll still be at 7 degrees Pisces. The whole zodiac is going to change depending on your location. Now, another thing to think about here is, where is the sign of Pisces in your natal chart? This is the thing that I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these natal charts, I highly encourage you to sign up for these classes that I'll be teaching, because I'm going to really go into detail on this, but also, again, make it simple for you guys to learn. You want to pull up your natal chart and look to see which slice of pie this symbol right here for the sign of Pisces is landing in, because they're called the houses. Those things that look like a slice of pie, those are the houses. And those are the areas of our life where things manifest. Okay. Like for this location right here, this is nobody's natal chart. This is just the chart for the time of this full moon. This is the second house. That's the house of money, material possessions, and values. If you pull up your natal chart and you see the sign of Pisces up here, that's the house of career. Or if you see it over here, that's the house of relationships. If you see it over here, that's the house of children and creativity. All these little slices of pie mean something different. Everybody has a natal chart. As long as you know approximately what time you were born, you'll be able to see which area of your life, not just this full moon, but anything astrological is manifesting through for you specifically. Okay, so there's that. I hope that made sense. All right, so let's talk about this. 7 degrees Pisces. This is in the first decan of that Piscean energy. So this is pretty Piscean energy. However, right off the bat, we can see this guy right here is right next to the moon. This is Saturn. Now, I think I mentioned this. I'm kind of feeling like there's pros and cons to everything in astrology, every house, every planet, every aspect, everything in astrology, you're going to find that there's pros and cons to. So as a Sagittarius rising, I like to focus on the positive. I like to focus on the optimism. Okay. Where focus goes, energy flows. So it's a good idea, focus on the positive, but I'm going to point this out. So Saturn, he is the bringer of reality. He's going through the sign of Pisces all the way, I believe it's in March of 2026. Okay, Saturn doesn't like to be in Pisces because Saturn's like, oh, we got discipline and responsibilities to take care of. And Pisces is like, what are you talking about? I don't need to go to work. Okay, so Saturn struggles in the sign of Pisces, but I think it might be a good thing because that Saturnian energy is bringing in the reality for this Piscean energy, this floaty, dreamy Piscean energy. Now, that's, again, this could be a beautiful thing for making sure that people aren't getting too lost in their dreamland during this full moon. But this is going back to the substances. And, if you are somebody who's indulging in heavy doses of things, that sort of thing, be very, very careful at the time of this full moon, because Saturn he's the bringer of death. Okay. And I don't want to scare anybody. That sounds terrible and tragic and scary. But it's, as long as we're being safe and smart with ourselves, it shouldn't be a problem. It's just, this is the kind of transit that, if you've got family members who are lost in substance abuse or something like that, you might want to keep an extra eye on them at the time of this full moon. Okay. So there's that. I don't mean to be like a Debbie Downer. It's just, that's the reality of Saturn. Okay. All right. Now quickly, we'll just touch on Neptune going through Pisces. We talked about this. Neptune is Pisces ruler. Okay. Neptune is going through Pisces, I believe, all the way till 2026, or maybe it's late 2025. Anyway, this Neptune going through Pisces is in part why people are having these wild spiritual awakenings and their psychic boundaries are breaking down. Okay. So that, as what's happening here is a few hours before this full moon, the moon will be right here, right before Saturn, and the moon is going to go this direction, go over Saturn, shine her full light on Saturn, and then like a day and a half later, she's going to roll on over Neptune. Ooh, dreamy Neptunian energy. Okay, so there's a lot going on with this Piscean energy. Something to think about there. All right, now let's move on over to the sun right here. The sun going through the sign of Virgo. So happy solar return to all my Virgo and friends out there. I happen to really enjoy the sign of Virgo. And I think that might be because I am a Pisces and like opposites attract, you can see that they're opposite each other. So the sign of Virgo is wonderful energy. It's another one that's adaptable. It's mutable, but it's an earth sign. So it's a lot more practical and it understands the value of going to work, like being of service, that sort of thing. And the sun is shining his light through that sign of Virgo for another, 23 days after this full moon. Not only that, but this sign of Virgo, it's really it's the sign that represents harvesting the fruits of the material world. I love this season. For those of you who garden, you know what I'm talking about. All my squash, my tomatoes, my kale, everything is just getting, so the corn, everything is getting ready to be harvested for this Virgoan season. I usually try to push out harvesting until the sun gets into Libra a little bit, but it depends on if things are ready to be harvested, they're ready to be harvested. So there's that. Okay. Let's talk about Mercury next. Mercury going through Virgo. As some of you know, I happen to really like Mercury and Virgo. Man, I wish my Mercury was in Virgo, or I also really like it in Aquarius too. But the reason for that is Mercury rules the sign of Virgo. Mercury works comfortably in the sign of Virgo. Mercury has everything to do with us constantly receiving information. Our mind is just like taking all this information in. Mercury receives it. He's the receiver. And he goes, okay, I got to put a file on it. I got to label this file and I got to put it away somewhere. I got to store it away somewhere in your consciousness so that when you want to communicate it, when you want to bring it back out, Mercury can go in and in his organized little way, find his file and bring it back out to communicate it. And some of you might know that Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini. Okay, in Virgo, it's about the organization skills. Okay, like I said, Mercury clearly has to stay somewhat organized. In fact, if people have a very debilitated Mercury in their natal chart, they can be kind of scattered, okay, or just kind of like dreamy or that sort of thing. But in Virgo, Mercury's like, oh, I know exactly where I put that file because I'm organized, okay? Now, and in Gemini, Mercury is about bringing that information back out to communicate it. Gemini is a sign of communication. So Mercury is clearly a busy character, right? So he's in retrograde. Okay, now there's a lot of things in retrograde. We've got Mercury in retrograde, Venus in retrograde, Uranus in retrograde, Chiron in retrograde, Neptune in retrograde, Saturn in retrograde, Pluto in retrograde. That's a lot of retrogrades. Now, I'm just going to say, everybody calm down. It's going to be okay. This does happen. It's not that big of a deal unless you have something in your natal chart. Okay, so this is Mercury in Virgo, retrograding at 19 degrees. Okay, if you have something in your natal chart that's near 19 degrees Virgo, this kind of thing might be happening where, gee, I was supposed to have this court date, and all of a sudden the court date got flipped around to another day. Or I was applying for a job, I was going to this job interview, and all of a sudden they're like, no, we gotta reschedule it. That's the kind of thing that can happen with Mercury in retrograde. Sometimes mental function might not be so optimal when Mercury's in retrograde, but again, if you don't have anything in your natal chart near 19 degrees Virgo, or maybe opposing that at 19 degrees Pisces or something like that, I don't feel a big need for concern here. Let's talk about Uranus next, because that one's a little bit more wild. So Uranus goes retrograde the day before this full moon. Now, some of you may have heard me say this before. Uranus and Pluto, those are the two that tend to show, and Neptune too, but mostly Uranus and Pluto tend to really show themselves when they're in retrograde, okay? Uranus, especially like the day, so he goes retrograde the day before this full moon. That's when Uranus goes wild as he first goes retrograde. And here we've got this full moon in Pisces and Uranus in fresh retrograde mode. So Uranus influences, first of all, Uranus has a huge influence on technology, like our devices that we use. I wouldn't be surprised if people's like, what the heck is wrong? Why is my computer breaking down? What's going on my phone? That sort of thing when Uranus goes retrograde, especially if you have anything in your chart near 23 degrees Taurus. Okay. But also Uranus influences things that are abrupt and unexpected. And I hate to say it, but things like earthquakes. Okay. Especially going through the sign of Taurus. Taurus is like the earth of the earth signs. This could be potential for earthquakes. Now, please do not feel fear. I mean, I live literally in like the heart of earthquake land here in California. I basically live on the San Andreas Fault. I don't feel any fear. I just don't. You know, I know everything's going to be okay, but don't be surprised if that kind of thing happened, even if it's not like an actual earthquake, if it's something else, you know, that's like abrupt, like, whoa, what just happened? Like all of a sudden this, you know, thing fell off the shelf out of nowhere. That's what Uranus does, stuff like that. Unexpected, weird changes. Okay. So there's that again, especially if you got anything in your chart that's near 23 degrees Taurus. Okay. Now briefly, we're going to touch on Jupiter going through Taurus, which we've talked about. Jupiter is going to be Taurus. Oh geez, all the way until I believe it's the end of May of next year. Uranus is going to be in Taurus, I believe all the way until 2026. But Jupiter is only going to be there for a little less than a year. Okay. But anything Jupiter touches, he's the great expander. Okay. Jupiter's like, woo, I'm going to make this a bigger deal right here. And he's pretty close to Uranus. So that kind of interferes with what I was just saying about that Taurus or Uranus going through Taurus energy. And meanwhile, these guys are trining these blue lines right here. They're harmonizing with Mercury in retrograde. That's a lot. That's a lot of kind of strange energy. Okay. So just be careful with that again. And also if you find anything near 15 degrees Taurus, honestly, it is very difficult to interpret a chart for the collective because so much of this depends on your own natal chart. If you've got something near 15 degrees Taurus in your natal chart, there's actually potentially you're having like the greatest luck ever because Jupiter can bring luck. Okay. So it's so unique to each and every one of us. Okay. So there's that. Let's jump back up here to Venus. Venus is also in retrograde. Now, Venus influences love, beauty, poetry. She represents any female in our life except for mother. Mother is the moon, okay? But, you know, a sister, a best friend, a neighbor, a daughter, that's Venus's energy. And if you've got anything near 12 degrees Leo, that's where she's at in retrograde, there could be something that's going on with like a female in your life, okay? Something that all of a sudden your daughter did something, you got to reevaluate the situation. Or Venus also, she is the influencer of beauty and things like art and poetry. Anything like feminine and flowy is very Venetian energy. Now, personally, I love Venus and Leo, as I've mentioned so many times. I think it's a wonderful, and she's like extravagant in the sign of Leo, okay? Because Leo's the sign of extravagance. But as she's retrograding, again, I wouldn't be concerned about this. Might be kind of weird for some people's personal relationships. Might be time to, you have to rethink of something going on with a relationship. Venus can have an influence on relationships. But again, I don't feel any need for concern unless you have something very prominent near 12 degrees Leo. Okay, now let's see, where should we go next? We'll go up to Mars in Libra. So Mars, if you look at the symbol for Mars, he's trying to penetrate. That's Mars. Mars is like, we got to go. We got things to take care of. I am the warrior. Okay. Mars is considered the planet of war. He's aggressive and dominant. Okay. Rules our sex drive because he's the penetrating masculine energy. Now, in the sign of Libra, he actually struggles here in the sign of Libra. There's definitely qualities to it. One of my very best friends, who's a male, has his Mars and Libra, and he's so friendly and so balanced. And I know quite a few people who have their Mars and Libra who are very friendly, charming people. The sign of Libra can be so charming. But the reason why Mars struggles here is because Libra is the sign of balance and partnerships and relationships and justice and fairness. And Mars is like, no, I got a war to go to, that sort of thing. And especially 2 degrees Libra, that's in the very, very early phase of that, the very early decan of that Libra energy. So Mars does struggle here, but overall, again, especially if you've got anything near 2 degrees Libra, you might be feeling like, I got things to do. You know, if you have, say you got your sun at 2 degrees Libra and all of a sudden Mars comes up and sits right on top of your sun. I love that transit. I love when Mars, every single year that Mars goes over my sun, it's like all of a sudden I get up, I clean the whole house. I have so much energy. It's actually, in my opinion, I really do enjoy that transit, but for some people it can bring frustrations. Okay. Again, if you've got anything near 2 degrees Libra, it could be like, oh, I have to go, I want to go goof off and play with my partner, but all of a sudden I have to go do this. Or it could manifest as all of a sudden I get the urge to go jogging. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to the gym for the first time in, 10 years, that sort of thing. Okay, let's go to Pluto. Pluto also in retrograde. Okay, Pluto is a very turbulent energy. Pluto brings destruction of whatever the energy of the sign is going through, but to create a more powerful rebirth, to like rebuild something, especially going to the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn has a lot to do with building. Capricorn's motto is I use, okay? Capricorn has a lot to do with authoritarian establishments, the structure of our civilization, even like the buildings in our cities and that sort of thing is very Capricornian energy. And here's Pluto, like just, and this is, I'm telling you guys, man, this election coming up in 2024 is going to be very, very interesting with Pluto. He's doing this dance, as I've mentioned so many times. He's going to move into the sign of Aquarius and he's going to retrograde back into the energetic degree of Capricorn and then move forward again. Pluto is in a very destructive place right now. Again, I don't mean to sound scary. Like, honestly, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay, but definitely some turbulent energies here. If you have anything in your chart near 28 degrees Capricorn, you've probably been going through a very powerful transformational process for years now. Pluto moves very, very slow. Okay, there's that. All right, let's briefly talk about the nodes. Okay, so here's the North Node, here's the South Node. Now, the North Node, as you guys have heard me say so many times before, this is what brings celestial energy in. The South Node is what takes the energy out. So we've got the North Node going through Aries. This is another reason I'm telling you that 2024 election is going to be wild. North node bringing energy in through the sign of Aries. Aries, as I was saying, Mars is like aggressive. Let's go. Aries is ruled by Mars. And please don't get me wrong. If you're an Aries and you're not aggressive, that's perfectly normal. There's so much more to the natal chart. But the sign of Aries in and of itself is an aggressive energy. It is the sign of war. Okay. Now, Libra is the sign of balance. Again, harmony, fairness, justice. And that's where the South Node is. That's what energy is going out through the sign of justice. That's a little strange. And with Pluto, it's going to be in his anaretic degrees and at some point retrograding during the time of this election. That's really pretty turbulent stuff. But it also, as we've got Uranus bringing abrupt changes, I wouldn't be surprised if something very abrupt or very unpredictable goes on with that election. Okay, lastly here, Chiron going through the sign of Self. Okay, Chiron, the wounded healer, going through Aries, the sign of Self, retrograding. Okay, so think about this. This is as it has been, I can't remember what year Chiron entered Aries. I believe it was 2017. And it's going to be there, I believe, all the way until 2025. Okay, but this is a time to heal ourselves. The wounded healer is going through the sign of Self. This is a time to heal ourselves. Now, if you have, he is retrograding. So if you've got anything near 19 degrees Aries, might be time to reevaluate your healing journey. Like, hey, this isn't quite working. It was working, but now it's not working anymore. And trust me, I'm very familiar with healing journeys. And there's plenty of times where I had to go through, you know, something as simple as, say, like apple cider vinegar. Oh my gosh, this is so great. All of a sudden my gut's so happy. And then one day it just stopped working. Like, oh God, now I got to reevaluate this situation. So, you know, keep all that in mind. Okay, I think I covered everything I wanted to there. Let's talk about body parts. Okay, so Pisces rules the feet. Okay, might want to be a little extra careful with our feet in the days surrounding this lunar transit. But moreover, Pisces also rules the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is definitely one that's not easy to work on. You know, it's easier to build muscle, or it's easier to, you know, work on certain parts of our body. But the lymphatic system is definitely challenging to work on. From my understanding, I'm not a professional in this at all, but from my understanding, it's a good idea to do like slow motion exercise for the lymphatic system. But I can also say that something called red root is an excellent herb for getting the lymphatic system flowing. Okay, now I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to give you any kind of medical advice at all. I'm just telling you things that I have learned from my teachers and also experienced for myself that worked for me. So I like to share the information with you. Now, another thing is that Pisces, being the very last sign of the zodiac, ruling the feet. Okay, that's, you know, like Leo rules the heart and Aries rules the head, Taurus rules the throat, like all these other parts of the body where we get that great sun energy coming in. Well, the feet, on the other hand, most people are wearing shoes. We're not getting the sun's energy absorbed through our feet. And one thing that's really important when we're missing sun energy is iodine. Okay. One thing that's really good for iodine is seaweed, and not like that, but we're talking about the sign of the fish here. So seaweed is very much associated with the sign of Pisces. Wonderful thing to be nibbling on in the days surrounding this transit, unless you're allergic or something like that. Again, I'm not a doctor, not claiming to be. And some people can't stand seaweed. I freaking love seaweed. I could literally eat, like, you know, those little packets of the seaweed packets. I could literally eat like 5 or 6 of those things a day. Isn't that ridiculous? But I just love it. Some people can't even stand the smell of it. So there's that. You can also get iodine. Oh, darn, I don't have it out here. I think I pulled it up in a video before. There's a company called Global Healing that has a really good nascent iodine, really, especially for you Pisces out there. Because unfortunately, Pisces, being the last sign of the zodiac, it's kind of unfortunately got like the weakest vitality. That does not mean that just because you're a Pisces, you don't have any vitality, because again, there's so much more to the natal chart. However, this is the sign that has the weakest vitality. Okay, so an iodine could be great for that. What else can we mention here? Oh, if you want to get more into like the dreamy zone, but then you also don't want to, you know, overdo it and, you know, just get super high on something called blue lotus. Blue lotus tea is not only beautiful and delicious, but it's a very dreamy, kind of like calming to the nervous system, just a lovely thing to be sipping on. Blue lotus tea. I really enjoy blue lotus. If you live in the Santa Cruz area, there's a place called Go Ask Alice. on Pacific Avenue in Santa Cruz. They have a really, really great, oh gosh, a company that makes wonderful tea blends, and I love their Blue Lotus tea. Okay, so there's that. Let's talk about crystals. So this right here, aquamarine. I also put, I don't normally wear this because it's obviously kind of ridiculous, huge, but it was my grandma's, and it is aquamarine, and it happens to be my birthstone. So I do love to wear it every once in a while, but it's just too big for me to be walking around in, especially as a gardener. But I did put it on for this recording. So aquamarine, obviously it's like the color of it, it's just the dreamy ocean color, you know. And this is, aquamarine is said to be really good. In fact, I just flew from California to Miami, Florida, and so I'm flying over ocean for a big part of that trip. Aquamarine is really, really good for those kinds of travels, even especially actually if you're on a boat. Aquamarine can be very protective, but also, again, can kind of like enhance the ethereal kind of energies of this Piscean, you know, influence. And this right here is something called fluorite. Okay, you can probably see a better one. It's a fluorite skull, actually, which is absolutely beautiful. Fluorite usually comes in like a green or purple. It also comes in yellow. Very, very Piscean stone, also very ethereal. But let's keep in mind here that like we're already getting a ton of this, like even though Saturn's next to the moon, we still have Neptune going through Pisces. So it's still this very dreamy energy. For some of you, you probably won't even notice, you know, for some of you, say you got a bunch of earth in your chart, you're a little more grounded naturally. But for those of us who don't have any earth in our chart, especially with Uranus going retrograde the day before this full moon, it is a really good idea to have some gemstones around that are much more grounding and calming. And one of my favorite ones for that is agate. Okay, this right here is a piece of blue lace agate. And I mean, any kind of agate is really a very good grounding stone. If you've got like a red agate, that might bring a little more like stimulation versus like the earth tones. This was going to bring up next. These are actually two forms of jasper. But as you can see, they're both very earthy. This one's got a little bit of a red tone to it, but that side's a little more earthy. Okay, both of these are great for grounding because they're earth tones. This is not stimulating, you know, this is kind of like, oh, geez, Uranus is in retrograde. I need to get grounded. That is really good for the earth tone stones. Is that it? Another one, I'm just going to bring this up. This isn't necessarily totally associated with the sign of Pisces, but you guys have seen me pull out this malachite before. Malachite is a really good stone. If you're like, you know, I want to start getting into this gemstone thing, I'm not really sure what I should start with. Malachite is not only protective, but it's also, there's like copper in here, and copper belongs to Venus. Malachite is just a wonderful protective stone. And I honestly can't think of a person, unless you're like insanely mercurial, meaning you've got like tons of Mercury energy in your natal chart. The green tone might be a little bit overstimulating for your nervous system, but for the most part, malachite really is an excellent stone. You know, that could be like your first stone, and use that for your journal entry, you know, every time, that sort of thing. Maybe you want to write down in your journal, I'm manifesting more gemstones in my life, that sort of thing. That's how I got them. That's how I got them. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. I apologize if I rambled for too long. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to schedule an astrology reading, visit erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.